Good morning. I'm here today to pay tribute to the memory of Reverend G.K. Andrews, my father. My dad, in 1953, at the age of 17, in his home church in Tabor City, North Carolina, at Old Zion Wesleyan Church, in a 2-week revival that was conducted by the Dr. Melvin Gentry, received a call into the ministry. He preached his first sermon at 17, and he preached his last sermon 59 years later, 1 year before his death. I told them at the funeral, the thing that I remember is about my dad was my dad, when he was 17, 18, before he went to the academy at Central Wesleyan, he knew he was called to preach. And so he used to go out into the woods and he would preach a full sermon out in the woods. And if you ever heard my dad, he had that booming voice. And I would go back, we would go to Tabor City to visit, and everybody that I saw would say, you know, I'd be working out in the field, and I used to hear this booming voice, and they'd say, that's just G.K. preaching. So my dad always said, you know, maybe I led a squirrel or a skunk or somebody to Jesus Christ early in my ministry. I think about the words of Mother Teresa come to mind. Mother Teresa said, whatever you do, whatever you're called to do, you should do it with a great love. And I would say today that if I wanted to leave you with one memory about my father, it was that my father had a great love. He was a man of great love. He loved God, certainly. My son, at the end of the funeral, when he was reflecting and we were just talking, he said, you know, the thing that I get about Granddad is his life was God, and that was certainly true. He loved his family. But in this context today, I want to say my dad loved the Wesleyan Church. There were two things that I knew that were never going to, well, maybe three. His love for his family, his love for his wife. My dad was a Wesleyan. That was never going to change. And my dad was a Wesleyan minister in the North Carolina West District. Went to General Conference this couple of weeks ago, and just overcome with emotion as I was just listening to how the Wesleyan Church had grown and what the Wesleyan Church is doing worldwide. And my dad and Jack Phillips and Hoover Smith and Don Daywalt and people who came before us gave their life for that. And just so thankful. My dad also had a great love for people. You know, it's not that he loved to preach to people, but he really loved the people to whom he preached. And, you know, we're told the second great commandment is to love your neighbor. And I don't know if you're like me, I want to pick the people that move in beside me. That's, you know, it's easy to love. My dad didn't care. He loved it either way. He just loved people. He loved those who he encountered. 2 weeks ago, had the opportunity there in Jacksonville, Florida, to preach at the Robert Weber Institute for Worship Study for their graduation. It's not affiliated with Wesleyan Church. I mean, I don't think they even know what a Wesleyan is outside of me and a few other people. But after the service, I'm standing in the vestibule, and this young man comes up to me, and he looks at me, and I know him. But the first thing he says to me is your dad G.K. Andrews? Was your dad G.K. Andrews? And I said, yes, he was. And he tells me who he was, and all the way back in West Asheville, his grandparents lived beside the church. They didn't come to the church. I don't even know their faith, don't even know if they were Christians, but I do remember the man got cancer, contracted cancer. And this young man who is now in the ministry said, "Let me tell you what I remember about your father." He said, when my granddad was sick, every day your father came to visit him. And I'm not so sure he remembers my dad more than he remembers my dad's love. So I will tell you, as I conclude this, probably in the latter half of my ministry, thinking about my dad, I define success much differently. Success in ministry much differently. And I believe in methods, and I believe in growth. But I will tell you, my dad and those who served with him and those who just loved their people and had a broken heart for them, they were right. They were right. And that's what we have to offer this world. May God bless the memory of G.K. Andrews.
Reverend Leroy Cox was my pastor. Then I was able to pastor in the same community with him. And then late in his life, I was able to be his pastor. He also was from Tabor City. That same revival that Dennis just spoke of, his dad, ministers were called into the ministry who served for years, leading lay people, college professors. I'm not sure what happened then, but we need to find out what it was, bottle it, and do it again over and over and over. Tremendous move of God during that time. First met Pastor Cox the first year I was in the 5th grade. It was the only year I was in the 5th grade, but he was our pastor, and he had a son, Tom, our age, and my parents just loved him so much. He was such an effective pastor, and I want you to please receive what I'm about to say, understanding I say it with complete respect and to make a point that we all could learn from. Since I've been serving as district superintendent, I was in one of the churches he served, and they had this row of pictures on the wall of all the pastors that have served there. Many of our churches have that. Now, we pastors think that's to honor us. What happens is when other people come, they say, "See what we've been living with all these years?" But he was on that, and so there's a leading layman in the church, and we're waiting for a meeting, and we're just standing in the hall, and I'm going down through the pictures, and I put my finger on his picture, and I said, "He was my pastor." And that guy, without any hesitation, said, "He's the best thing that ever happened to this church." And then he said, "He wasn't much of a preacher." We could learn from that. I mean, he was so effective with people. He loved people so deeply. He had a great sense of humor. We were youth pastors in our early 20s in Kannapolis, and that's where he and Miss Cox were at North Kannapolis, and so we would go over sometimes after church, and they would just sit and pour into us. I mean, there was a lot we were trying to understand, and he was just like a father that would speak to us and share with us. But I'll never forget one night, he said, "You know, we had this problem during realignment." Now, during realignment, I was 16. I'd like to tell you that I was focused on what was going on in the Wesleyan Church, but I was actually building my testimony during that time, and I didn't really know what he was talking about. He said the Pilgrim churches did not require parsonages to have window treatments. He said the Wesleyan Methodist churches did. He said we moved from a Wesleyan Methodist church to a Pilgrim church, and it was there at North Kannapolis, and he said there were no blinds on the windows. I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, after just a few days of Loma and I changing in front of the blinds, they came and put curtains throughout the house." I said, "Is that true?" He said, "We'll just say it is." So he loved people so deeply. His son Tom was memorializing him at Southern Wesleyan. He talked about how to make ends meet Richard Cox was a painter, and they would leave early in the morning, and he would sit in the driver's seat of the truck and put his hand out like this and put a rung of the ladder over it. Tom would sit near the back of the truck and put another rung of the ladder over his arm, and they would drive around just to make ends meet. Every church he pastored flourished in so many ways because of the love that he had for people and the way that he poured into them. I understand that when he left Tabor City, he had to make a decision because he was running kind of like a produce stand, and literally this is what his family, as we'd say in the mountains, they tell it for the truth. They said that an ALE agent, they weren't called ALE then, they were, the revenuers came around to check his stand because it was so profitable, they knew he could not just be selling vegetables there. Isn't that amazing? That was his people skills, his deep love for people. When I would visit him, as I went down to Southern Wesleyan a couple times a year for meetings, I'd always go by to visit him. And he would ask about people in the church. Every church he pastored, he would ask about other pastors. He would just, it was uncanny, the recollection he had, even with some dementia, of all the people he had pastored. And he'd want to know how they were doing. He just had a deep love for people that could never be replaced. One of those last visits, in fact, the last time I saw him, he asked how the churches were going, getting filled. I said, well, brother, we need somebody. Would you take one? And so Loma, his wife, told me, he said, he was so tickled that you said that, and he thought that was funny. I said, I wasn't kidding. We would be glad to have him. At his funeral, it was Memorial Day weekend. Now, everybody's gone on Memorial Day weekend. I do not recall a funeral. I've been involved in several funerals over the years. I do not recall a funeral where I've seen more workers from the nursing home come than came to his funeral and talked about the impression he made on their lives. From the day God called him till the day he went home, he never stopped loving people. May God bless his memory.
It's my privilege to share with you the life of Bake Garman, or George Baker Garman. He came to us from Maryland, and he always said he was still from the South, Baltimore City, Maryland. I got to know Bake at Catawba Heights, which is now Crossroads. It was my privilege to be his pastor before he became a pastor. As I got to know Bake, I knew that he was a man who loved his family. He loved his wife, Donna Kay, who drug him, well, probably not drug him, he drug her into the church. Well, let me explain all that. Donna Kay was a member of North Kannapolis Wesleyan Church, and he met her on a blind date and fell madly in love, and he says, I've got to figure out this church thing because she's in church. She sang and played the piano, so Bake says, I've got to figure out what this is all about. So Bake became very involved in music, and he traveled around with them as they would sing. They were married 40 years. Before that, Bake had served our nation in the U.S. Army. As I started thinking about that, he had a servant's heart. The father of 3 children, son George Phillips Garman. Phil served us at South Mountain, another servant, and he married Joy Wooters Garman, an ordained minister in our denomination, in our district. He has a daughter, Kelly Dawn Garman, who married Rob, and Rob was a young man Bake mentored, and a daughter, Stacy Renee Garman, who graduated from SWU. Bake had connections, and he connected us to each other and to our church and to our denomination. He was the super proud grandpa of George Wesley Garman. Some of y'all know Little Wesley. When I became Bake's pastor, he got his lay minister's license in 1997. It's really interesting. In 2002, I don't know if this has ever happened before. I've asked about this. He felt called to the ministry. He was really kind of in the ministry, but felt called to ordain ministry at annual conference. The speaker had finished speaking, and Reverend David Emery felt like he should call us to prayer. And he got up and led us in a prayer, and Bake got up and started walking towards the platform. Some of us saw him and thought, what is he doing? You don't do that. at annual conference. So we followed him up, and he felt called into the ministry. And I thought about the incredible heritage we just heard about. What an incredible heritage we have, and what an influence on lives we share. And Bake is a part of that heritage. He was ordained in 2007. In 2004, though, he started serving Morganton Wesleyan Church. It was the only church he would serve until his death of 11 years. He served there 11 years, one church. He told me he had a ministry to the church, but he had a ministry to the community more so. Bake had worked, had a complete career at Duke Energy, and there he was also in the ministry, caring for people there. As he retired, God had other plans for him, and his journey continued. As I thought back before his ministry, the ministry I saw him in was there at Catawba Heights. He was the vice chairman. He was a Sunday school teacher. He was a choir member. Anything the church needed doing, he was willing to do. And then that just went on as he became a full-time pastor. He had one desire when he was feeling led to be ordained, and that was to finish before our former district superintendent Henry Williams retired. And Bake went through flame, and he was able to finish the process before Reverend Henry Williams retired as DS. Bake had a tremendous love, and I just kept hearing that theme. Bake loved the Lord with all of his heart. He loved the church, and that's a theme we've just heard this morning. He loved the church, and he loved the Wesleyan church. He loved the people of the church, and he loved pastors. He loved all of his pastors, and he loved pastors. He was always connecting with pastors. He loved his community. He loved his family, and he loved his wife. Reverend Bake Garman poured out his life for his Lord. He set the bar high for us to follow after. He made a difference in this world, and I would believe across this congregation this morning, there's some of you would honestly say he made a difference in my life. He expected the same from us. He expected us to make a difference. I just want to read you a brief scripture that I shared, and you've probably heard it hundreds of times as ministers have gone on to their greater reward, but it's found in 2 Timothy chapter 4. For I'm already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Bake wanted everyone to long for the Lord's appearing. He did keep the faith. He honored the Lord, and he served well. He left us a great example to follow. May God bless the memory of Reverend Bake Garman.
My heart can sing when I pause to remember. A heartache here is but a stepping stone along a trail that's winding always upward. This troubled world is not my final home, but until then my heart will go on singing. Until then, with joy I'll carry on, until the day my eyes behold that city, until the day God calls me lose their value if we recall they're borrowed for a while, and things of earth that cause the heart to tremble, remembered there will only bring a smile. But until then, my heart will go on singing, and until then, with joy I'll carry on, until the day my eyes behold that city, until the day God calls me home, and until then my heart will go on singing, until then with joy I'll carry on, until the day my eyes behold that city, until the day God calls me home.
Would you stand for the benediction, and please remain in your places for about 30 seconds of announcements immediately afterward. Father, thank you for these examples we've had. Example of your Son who loved us so much he gave everything. Thank you for your Spirit that so sweetly was with us last evening. Thank you for these saints who served you. And as we go from this time, may we go in the assurance there's not a moment we serve that we serve in vain. We thank you for your power and your presence. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.